Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. I'm Brother Pino, and today's subject is: did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam perform miracles? Now, I get asked this question all the time, but before I go into that, I just want to explain this. And people, I think, are a little bit ignorant about this sort of subject. All the messengers of Allah all had the ability to perform miracles. Now, why was this? Because they were under the guidance and protection of Allah, and if they needed to perform a miracle, whether it was desperate measures or something that needed to be done, of course all they had to do was pray to Allah, and Allah will give them the authority. Now, the word miracle itself, when that's mentioned, most people just think of Jesus alayhi salam. Now, yes, of course, he did perform miracles, and he performed some good ones. But like he said in the Bible, I by myself can do nothing. So that clearly states that he didn't have the power and the ability to perform miracles unless he got the authority from Allah. So I just wanted to get that in concrete first, and I truly believe that's true what I've just said. But let's start with Prophet Noah. Now, Prophet Noah alayhi salam, he performed a miracle. He was forever telling his people to worship the one God, and for a long time they weren't listening to him. They made fun of him, they took no notice of him, they all thought he was crazy. And in the end, after Noah had said to Allah so many times, the people are not listening to me, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, this time I will wash them away, I will drown those who disbelieve. So of course Allah then said to Noah, you shall build an ark, and you shall save yourself and your family and all the animals. Now, what's quite miraculous about this ark was the fact, there was two things, was the fact that Allah had revealed to him the dimensions of how to, the size of this ark, and secondly, the type of wood. Now, the dimensions from memory, and according to my studies, was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. Now, where did he get those measurements from? He just didn't pluck them out of the air, did he? No. Allah had revealed him those measurements. And secondly, the type of wood was cypress wood. Now, let's think about it logically. If somebody come up to me tomorrow and said, Brother Pino, there's a big storm heading this way, alright? It's going to flood everything. You better build yourself a boat. Now, for me, I'm quite a handy man, I can do that. But for most people, they don't even know how to use a saw or what wood to use. So, for Prophet Noah to be given specific dimensions and the type of wood to use was a miracle itself. No question about it. So, no question about it, like I said. Prophet Noah performed a miracle. And of course, when he and his family and all the creatures were on the ark, and those who did believe him, that got on the ark with him, said, this is truly a miracle, alright, from Allah. And of course the flood came, and those who disbelieved were drowned. So, moving on to the next prophet, Prophet Moses alayhi salam. He at a young age was thrown into the river in a basket because there was an order to kill all the babies. He was under the protection of Allah, and he was saved. He was one of those that was saved. And at a young age, he was given the option of eating a piece of red fruit or a piece of red hot coal. Unfortunately, he chose the coal and he put it in his mouth, and it burnt his tongue and gave him a speech impediment. Now, when Moses realized that he was the messenger of Allah and went up to the mountains to claim the 10 commandments, there was a condition he asked Allah. He asked Allah, please restore my speech so I can have the ability to preach and spread this message. And Allah restored his speech, got rid of his speech impediment. And that truly alone was a miracle. Also, Moses had a staff in his hand, big stick. And Allah said to him, throw it down. And it turned into a snake. And the Pharaoh thought it was just trickery and magic and sorcery. And when Moses was challenged by the order of the Pharaoh, by the best magicians, truly Moses was victorious. He threw down his stick and it turned into a serpent, whereas the magicians had thrown down their stick and it turned into a snake. But Moses' serpent ate the other snakes. So of course the Pharaoh then had a good idea this was possibly a messenger of God. Also, Moses used to put his hand here, his right hand here, on the left side of his chest, just under his left arm, and he would pull it out and he would have radiant, bright light coming out of it. Now in Arabic we call light nur. So he had nur coming from his hand. Now, those were a couple of the miracles that, he had. He had the nur from his hand, and he had the staff that every time he threw it on the floor, it turned into a snake. But the best miracle that Moses alayhi salam performed was striking the Red Sea and parting it for him and his people that were on a mass departure, the Exodus, from Pharaoh and his henchmen. That was from Allah. Allah had told him to strike the sea with his staff, and thus the sea had parted, making way for them to escape. So both Noah and Moses performed miracles, no question about it. Prophet Ibrahim was saved from the fire just before he was thrown into the fire. Angel Jibril appeared to him at the last minute and said, "You can save yourself, just tell me, I'll tell Allah." He refused. He said Allah was sufficient. Allah heard this, and at the time when he was thrown into the fire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had cooled the flames down and he walked out unscathed. Now, Ibrahim got punished because he was frustrated and angry with the idolaters, people who would worship pieces of wood. Now, I'll give you an example, shall I? If I went into my shed, got a piece of wood and carved it and made a face and stuck some arms on it and stuck it on my table, and I turned around and said that was God. Well, I created that piece of carving, so I should be greater than that piece of wood. But back in the day of the Prophet Ibrahim, it wasn't like that. And this was the message that Prophet Ibrahim was trying to tell him. Alright? Worship your creator. Alright? And not the creation. Don't worship things that are made out of wood. Worship Allah. And because he smashed up all the idols, this is why he was punished. But from the grace of Allah, Allah saved him. Prophet Ibrahim walked out of the fire without a mark on him. Also, another miracle that the Prophet Ibrahim performed was he was given the instructions to build the Kaaba. And he was told to build it in Mecca. Now, geographically speaking, Mecca is located in the centre of the world. And right in the position where the Kaaba was built, underneath is the foundations of the dwelling place of Adam and Eve. That itself is a miracle. To build that Kaaba there. It's no coincidence. He just didn't think, oh, I think I'll build it there. No. Allah had guided him to that spot and told him exactly where to build it. In previous times, the Kaaba was had been attacked by elephants, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent thousands of birds, each holding a stone, dropping them down on the elephants and the attackers as they were heading towards the Kaaba to destroy it. Had Allah had not sent these birds to drop all these stones, the Kaaba truly would have been flattened. And these stones had killed and injured many men and the elephants as well. Thus they had turned around and retreated. The Kaaba was saved. A miracle itself. Now, let's talk about Jesus alayhi salam. Yes, he cured the blind, he healed the sick, he fed the 5,000. He performed very good miracles. But again, this was only from the authority of Allah. Because Jesus said in the New Testament, I by myself can do nothing. Clearly shows that without the authority of Allah, a miracle isn't going to happen. But there are two miracles that I'm actually going to debunk today that are in the New Testament, and I truly believe that didn't happen. Now the first one is turning water into wine. Now this particular one always jumps out first, and I'll tell you why. When I ask Christians, what was the first miracle Jesus performed? The first one they say is this one. He turned water into wine. And unfortunately, they are wrong. The first miracle that Jesus alayhi salam performed was when he spoke as a baby. He saved his mother's life. After she returning to her people, after giving birth to Jesus alayhi salam, they condemned her for having a child out of wedlock and not disclosing who the father was. She was told by Allah not to say anything to anybody. And at the point where they were going to sentence her to death, probably stone her to death, Jesus alayhi salam spoke as a baby and stuck up for his mother. Now this is something he didn't ask for. This was something that was put upon him. And in the Quran, Jesus alayhi salam said this and saved his mother's life. In Surah 19, Al-Maryam, verse 30, Jesus alayhi salam said, I am indeed a servant of Allah. He hath given me a revelation and made me a prophet. Now he said a little bit more, but that was one of the first things he said. Now when he said that as a baby, they truly believed Mary was holding the prophet of Allah. And it was then they all got down on their hands and knees and they begged for mercy to Allah. Now, when I tell the Christians this was the first miracle, they don't believe it. They believe that Jesus alayhi salam turned water into wine. Now, I'm going to refute this claim, and this is how it's going to be. In the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, this turning into water into wine is only mentioned in the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John was mentioned, or revealed, should I say, about 100 years after Jesus' ascension. This is not mentioned in any of the other Gospels. Now, why is that? If this was such a historic event, why is it not mentioned in the previous Gospels? Surely somebody must have seen it. But in my opinion, I don't believe anybody saw it, and I don't believe Jesus alayhi salam would turn water into wine. Why? Because Jesus' mission was to fulfill the commandments of Moses. And one of those commandments says, do not drink anything that intoxicates you. In other words, do not drink alcohol. So why would it be befitting for a prophet of Allah to turn water into wine and encourage people to drink? And encouraging people to drink makes them become foolish. The stupidity comes out of them. Debauchery, fornication was all going on. When people drink, all silly things happen. And Jesus alayhi salam would have got blamed for that, for turning the water into wine. And it would be befitting for a prophet to ask Allah, and can you imagine this? Jesus saying to Allah, "Oh Almighty Father, please, can I turn this water into wine so everybody can have a good time tonight and get drunk and have a good time and not care about where they find themselves in the morning and things like that. I'm encouraging them to drink." Do you think Jesus would ask Allah to give him the authority to let people drink? What sort of prophet would Jesus would be to encourage people to drink? Wouldn't be a good prophet, would he? And the message that he'd be spreading wouldn't be a good message neither. So I totally debunk that claim that Jesus alayhi salam turned water into wine. We also got to remember that in the Gospels, in the Gospel of Mark, which was the first Gospel that was revealed, Jesus was nothing more than just a messenger and a man. By the time the other Gospels were revealed, and when it got to the Gospel of John, there's things that are mentioned in the Gospel of John that is not mentioned in the other Gospels. And the Gospel of John really have glorified Jesus alayhi salam. Then there's the other miracle that I want to debunk, and that is the walking on water. Now, I've probably got Christians who will be watching this and be screaming, probably throwing their dinner at the TV. But I'm going to debunk this one again, because I don't believe Jesus alayhi salam walked on water. Not saying that he couldn't have done, but I don't believe in his time as a messenger he performed that miracle. And these are my reasons. In the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of John, there's no mentioning of who saw him walking on water. All it says that they saw him. But there's nobody by name that saw him walking on water. There's no mention of the walking on water in the Gospel of Luke. So there's a problem there. But in the Gospel of Matthew, it says that Peter got out of the boat and walked on water towards Jesus. Now, who would give Peter the authority? And he wasn't even a prophet. How could he just get out of the water and get out of the boat, and walk on water? Just like that. It just doesn't make sense. Now, my whole point of all this walking on the water is this. If Jesus did do that, his disciples would have glorified him even more. They would have then turned around and said, he must be God. But do you think Allah would have saw this and said, why are you walking on water for? Alright? You doing that is only going to get them to glorify you more and not me. That's not what I sent you there for, to show off. Because this is just basically an act of showmanship, showing off. And the prophets, they were not appointed to show off. They were there to do a specific job, to get everybody to worship the one true God, Allah. So we're walking on water is really, doesn't fit. There was no point of it, and I don't believe Jesus would have done it, because he knew Allah wouldn't have been pleased with him. It would have been something totally against Allah's wishes. So when you think about it logically, the Bible goes against those who believe that Jesus alayhi salam walked on water. I definitely believe that he didn't do it. And certainly he didn't turn the water into wine. There's something else we have to make mention here, that the Gospels are not written by Jesus' disciples. Why? Because most of his disciples were fishermen and they were illiterate. They couldn't read or write. So there's no telling that these Gospels are true. But to have one Gospel 100 years later to say that only one Gospel said that Jesus alayhi salam turned water into wine, for me it stinks. It's just not right. How 100 years can go by and then it can get mentioned, when it should have got mentioned 100 years sooner? And of course the walking on the water, for me, just does not befit a prophet's actions. Jesus was a humble, pious person, and there was no purpose for him to show off like that and walk on water. There was no need for it. Now, let's move on to our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because this is basically what this topic is all about. Did he perform miracles? Well, the answer is yes, of course he did. No question about it. Those of you who are sitting there thinking he wasn't a prophet and he didn't perform miracles, well, today I'm going to prove you wrong. He did perform miracles. He performed many. He did the same as Jesus alayhi salam. He cured the sick, healed the blind, fed people with an enormous amount of people with a small piece of bread. He managed to do that. But also, he was able to ask Allah to protect him, give him a miracle. Now, when him and his people were oppressed, he was constantly on the run because people didn't like, especially the tribe called the Quraysh, they wanted to kill him. Now, on one occasion, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, him and his best friend Abu Bakr hid in a cave. Now, whilst they were hiding in the cave, they also learned that the Quraysh that were after them were closing in on them. And Abu Bakr panicked, got scared, probably almost crying, and said to Allah, this is it. Our time is up. But the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, no, we're gonna pray to Allah and He will help us. And they did just that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved them. A spider had appeared and span a web over the entrance of the cave, and a pigeon had made a nest also right next to the cave entrance. Now, with that, when the Quraysh had turned up and they saw the entrance of the cave, one of the men had said to the leader of the Quraysh, let's go and look and check inside that cave. And the leader said, no, because if somebody had gone in that cave, they would have disturbed the web and a pigeon wouldn't rest there. So let's move on. And they were saved. A miracle was performed. And Abu Bakr and our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were saved. Another occasion was when a Jewish woman had cooked some goat meat. Now goat meat was one of the Prophet's favourite meat. He loved it. And so she cooked this goat meat and she laced it with lots of poison, enough to kill an elephant, just to make sure that she was going to get the job done right. When the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam put the meat in his mouth, both the meat and the appearance of Angel Jibril told him to remove that meat from his mouth because it was poisonous. So he took the meat out of his mouth, but one of his companions unfortunately had ate the meat and died. Now, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as humble and pious as he was, asked the Jewish woman, did you put poison in that meat? And she said, yes. And he asked her why. And she said, because I wanted to see if you truly was the messenger of Allah. Humble and pious as he was, he forgave her. Now, can you imagine if you did that to somebody today? Lace their food with all sorts of things to cause them sickness or even death. Do you think you'd forgive that person? Most people wouldn't. Us Muslims, we have to. We always have to forgive our enemies. But the average person would probably want revenge, but not the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He forgave that woman there and then. Another occasion a miracle was performed by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on a time where he was sat under a tree all on his own, and one of his enemies had sneaked up to him, withdrew his sword and pointed it at the Prophet and said, now who will save you? The Prophet just calmly looked at him and just said, Allah. And then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam started to pray. Whilst he was praying, the attacker with the sword started to feel scared and frightened. He overcame all this fear that came over him so badly and that he trembled that he dropped his sword. After the Prophet had finished praying, he picked the sword up and then put the sword in the attacker's face and said, now who will save you? The attacker begged the Prophet to spare his life, and the Prophet said, I'll tell you who will save you. The same Allah is the one that would save me. Now, this man ran off back to his people and said, I have just come from the best of mankind. Now, this is a guy who a minute ago wanted to kill the Prophet and now went back and told his people, I've just come from the best of mankind. That truly itself is a miracle. I can tell you now, if somebody was to do that in today's times, the outcome wouldn't have been the same as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, the best miracle that ever came from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is no doubt, and no question about it, is the Quran. The Quran is a living miracle itself. And why do I say that? Because the Quran has the answers to all our problems as Muslims. Now, I can remember speaking a few days ago, a brother said to me, Brother Pino, have you ever had a problem and there's an issue going on in your life and you just randomly opened up the Quran and there's the issue in the Quran right in front of you? I said, brother, that's happened to me many a times. But it doesn't surprise me anymore, because why? The Quran is a miracle. The Quran was given to the Prophet Muhammad from Allah. And Allah has said in the Quran that He will protect this Quran from corruption. Now, in Surah 15, verse 9, Allah says, "We have without doubt sent down the message, and we will assuredly guard it from corruption." Now think about it. The Quran now has been with us for 1,439 years. And nobody is able to corrupt the Quran. And nobody will ever will, neither. Even if they did, they would not get away with it. And it will go back to its true text. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Quran that He has made the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam the seal of all prophets, which means that the Quran will be guarded from corruption, and that the Prophet Muhammad is the final messenger, meaning that the Quran will never be corrupted, thus we will not need another messenger. It makes sense. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the final messenger, and the Quran is the final revelation, a living miracle. I love reading the Quran. It's there's no book like it. And for us Muslims, we are so privileged to have these scriptures of the Quran, Allah's words. Now, with that, I'm going to say this. The answer to the question of this topic, did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam perform miracles? Yes, he did. No question about it. All the other prophets performed miracles. It wasn't just Jesus. Jesus was a great messenger and performed many miracles. But after him, 600 years later, the arrival of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came along and brought us the revelation, which was the Quran, the living miracle today. Now, all the prophets performed miracles, and it was from the grace of Allah. Now, if I've said anything in this video that might have upset you, please forgive me, because I'm not here to tread on anybody's toes, but at the same time, I think logically we shouldn't accept what's not logical. Now, I mentioned about turning the water into wine and walking on water. Now, for me personally, it was not logical for Jesus alayhi salam to perform those miracles, because there was no basis for it, and Allah wouldn't have been pleased with him, especially walking on the water. For me, that would just be a showing off prophet. So that, in a nutshell, for me is just a small talk on, did the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam perform miracles? And your answer is yes. So this is where I leave off. Please subscribe to my channel. Please give me a like. I do my very best, and I don't mean to upset anybody. This is personally my opinion. So until the next time, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.